Thank you very much. I'm going to take a minute to continue the previous session for a moment because the previous session did not include geopolitics. Where are these refugees coming from? They're coming from wars. Where are the wars coming from? They're coming from geopolitics. Elena mentioned the Venezuelan refugees. They didn't come out of the blue. They came out of a U.S. regime change attempt to overthrow the government of Venezuela. This was a concerted, standard U.S. regime change, and it led to millions of refugees. Where did the Syrian refugees come from in Europe? I don't think Europeans understand properly. It came from a CIA operation signed by President Obama called Operation Timber Sycamore in the fall of 2011 to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad. Where did the Ukrainian refugees come from? It came from an overthrow by the United States government of the government of Viktor Yanukovych in February 2014, which was the beginning of the war in Ukraine, because the U.S. plan was to expand NATO to Ukraine over Russia's red lines. That has led to millions of Ukrainian refugees. Where does the current war refugees of Palestine come from? I didn't hear the word Israel said. Israel is committing genocide right next door. It's not a matter of cleaning up the refuse or attending to the environmental damage afterwards. Thousands of people are being killed every week right now. Right next door, where is Europe and its voice to stop the genocide? This is politics we're talking about. We're talking about war. These are all unnecessary wars. My country, the United States, has been the author of most of this, or the funder and the armor of most of this. We provide the munitions for Israel every single day. So you worry about refugees, worry about war. Europe will do well in peace. Europe does very badly in war. Europe is not a militarized continent because it learned the lessons. If you look at the rankings of military strength, Europe doesn't even show up. The US, Russia, China, India, South Korea, and so forth. Europe's nowhere on that list. If you look at who is the lead in sustainable development, Europe's all the top positions. If you look at the lead of who has the highest human well-being, Europe is in the top of all of those positions. Europe's vocation is peace. But you, unfortunately, act like the United States doesn't exist except to follow its orders, and that there's no politics in these conflicts, just refugees coming out of someplace. These are wars of choice. And Europe is right in the war zone because it's all along Europe's periphery. But these are U.S. wars of choice. And as long as Brussels confuses NATO and the European Union, Europe is going to be the one to suffer because these are two different things. NATO is an out-of-date institution that has no role. The Soviet Union ended in 1991. Russia is not going to invade Europe, except if you hear demented talk by the U.S. military-industrial complex or those who are paid by it. This is what this is about. I'm sorry to say that panel did not get to the crux of the issue of why Europe has refugees from Syria, from Ukraine, from the Middle East. It's because of conflict, and we need to stop these conflicts at the negotiating table today. All the talk about defeating Russia, good luck. 6,000 nuclear warheads. Be my guest. Go right ahead. You'll get us all destroyed. So we can't talk about sustainability unless we have peace. And we can't have peace unless we have negotiations. And we can't have negotiations if we have, I'm sorry to say, absolutely vicious madmen like Netanyahu, who is creating a genocide next door, right next door to you right now. So this is our grim reality. The positive news is when we issue our Sustainable Development Report, 19 of the top 20 countries in the world are European. That's Europe's vocation. Europe's overwhelmingly the happiest countries in the world of life satisfaction. The United States, by the way, is way down the list on all of this. We're 48th in life expectancy in the US. We are 46th in sustainable development. Europe's at the top. But Europe is listening to the United States because it thinks that it has to follow the US geopolitics. This is a huge mistake. Europe should refocus on peace. It should tell the United States, stop making wars on our periphery, whether it's Syria or whether it's Ukraine or whether it's funding Israel's onslaught of the Palestinian people. Stop it, because then Europe can be secure, it can have safe borders, it can stop the mass influx of refugees coming from wars, and it can get on with the European Green Deal. And Europe is not in a terrible shape. It's got the highest life expectancy. It's got the greenest economy in the world. It's got wonderful institutions, if you want to talk about institutions. But it doesn't do well in wartime. So this is really the basic point. Now, all of Europe's leading politicians, van der Leyen and others, are saying, we have to gear up for war. Well, that'll be Europe's end. For Europe to survive, it should gear up for peace and sustainable development and diplomacy. And if it does so with the new Commission, it should reinforce the European Green Deal. Most of all, what Europe needs is a plan. It's got plenty of goals. It's got a good strategy. It's got plenty of laws. It's got plenty of regulations, but it doesn't have an investment plan. It needs an infrastructure investment plan that connects Europe, the West Balkans, Russia, dare I say, without pipelines being blown up by the United States, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, and North Africa. A plan, an integrated infrastructure for this part of the world. And that plan is the key for Europe's prosperity for the generations to come. It could be easily designed. It should be the work of the new European Commission together with the member states. It can only happen in peacetime. So those are the brief remarks I want to say.
Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, I hope Jeff is still on.
I am.
Yeah, good, because the screen has gone blank there. I'm sure an awful lot of people would disagree with you about Yanukovych and so on, but you make a very powerful point. In terms of the EU and a plan, I mean, there is now the Mario Draghi plan, which is pretty comprehensive, but of course involves an awful lot of spending on defense procurement and better defense procurement. So, I mean, I see the point you're making, but just going back to the original bit, I mean, what do you expect from, actually, let me digress slightly. I mean, you talk basically about Europe being almost a poodle to the United States. You can certainly apply that to the UK, because the UK always makes a thing about the special relationship with the US, which I think was a term coined by Churchill. But it always seems to me that the real special relationship is actually between the US and Israel. And Bibi Netanyahu, whether you love him or loathe him, has managed to play American politics like a supreme violinist. So if you go back to the US election on November 5, what do you expect from it, depending on whichever candidate wins?
Yeah, first of all, let me say that I loathe him profoundly. He is one of the most murderous politicians of modern history. He has been, since 1995, promoting regime change in the Middle East. Since the Middle East wasn't happy with Israel, he was going to change the Middle East using the US military to do it. He was the one that pressed for the invasion of Iraq. He was the one that pressed for the overthrow of Assad. He is the one that has been calling for the war against Iran, which may be happening any moment now, for the last 30 years. He's a detestable person who has gotten everything wrong, and we shouldn't mince our words because we're on the verge of a world war. If Israel makes a strong attack against Iran and Iran responds with hypersonic missiles attacking Israel, God knows where we're going to be 2 days from now. And Netanyahu, you are correct, has basically owned and operated U.S. foreign policy for 30 years. And the two candidates are falling all over themselves to say who's more pro-Israel. And Trump talks about destroying Iran, and Harris talks about how she stands 100% with Israel in its current genocide. It's a disgrace. It's a complete disgrace. The only hope I have is that our deep state, which really runs policy, knows that we're on the verge of nuclear war if there's a major attack on Iran, because it will escalate. Iran will acquire nuclear weapons. Iran does have Russia as an ally. But this is Netanyahu's plan. This isn't an accident. This is his plan. So I just want to underscore, on that choice, I loathe him. Okay. And both candidates are falling all over themselves to prove themselves to the Israel lobby. It's quite a show in the midst of this mass slaughter and this expansion of the war underway.
Excellent.
So this is our real situation. And may I say, by the way, with respect to Britain, if I might, why does Keith Starmer take his first day on the job to go to Kiev? Why does he focus on deep strikes inside Russia? For God's sake, doesn't the UK have other things on its plate right now, like reforming the National Health Service or the internal situation or a massive budget out of control? Why does a labor